A Musical Life, with classical crossover sensation Time for Three. Time for Three is made up of violinists Kendall and Nikki Chooi and double bassist Ranaan Meyer, and can probably be best described as a classically trained garage band. With an exciting mix of originals, covers, and classical music with a capital T twist, these guys have electrified audiences around the world and were recently featured on a PBS special performing with the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra. This episode of A Musical Life is brought to you by something I'm really excited to announce: A Musical Life Mastermind. Are you a teacher looking for more students? Or a musician looking for more gigs? Or a student looking for a better future in music? A Musical Life Mastermind is a group of peers that encourage, support, and share ideas to help each other achieve success. My goal for this mastermind group is to equip you with everything you need to create your own business or career track as a musician and artist. Visit amusicallifemastermind.com. Once again, that web address is amusicallifemastermind.com. Welcome to A Musical Life. I'm Hugh Sung. We're starting a special series of episodes that focus on entrepreneurial musicians who think way outside the box. I'm so excited to have Time for Three on the show to help me kick this off. I recently met up with Nikki, and Ranaan after one of their jam session rehearsals at the Curtis Institute of Music. Nikki Chooi, by the way, is the newest addition to Time for Three, having replaced co-founder Zach DePue, who is currently the concertmaster of the Indianapolis Symphony. Before we get started, I need to apologize ahead of time for the audio quality of this interview. This was my first time setting up 4 microphones in a live session, and I think I got a little overexcited in the beginning and kind of blew out the levels a bit. Anyway, if you've never heard of Time for Three before, let's start off by listening to their rendition of Chardas by Vittorio Monti. Oh my goodness. Welcome to the show, guys. It is so awesome to have you here.
Hugh, it's so good to be on your show.
Great to be here.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay, so I have to tell you guys, I just came back from giving some lectures at Anderson University in Indiana. I'm driving up one of the main roads, and what do I see? This huge billboard with your picture on it promoting one of your upcoming concerts with the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra. How cool is that? You guys are rock stars.
Oh. Gosh. Thank you.
Love it.
No, thank you. So it's such a treat to have you guys here on the show. So just let's step back a little bit. I'm kind of in groupie all right now, but let's calm down a bit. Now you've
Oh man, it's so good to see you.
you too, man.
You know, this is reciprocal. I mean, we
Get outta
watched
here.
you perform, all this time at Curtis. And
Man.
some of us played with you, and
That's right.
we're honored to just, be hanging out with you, man.
This is a lot of fun. Well, thank you
It's a
so
real
much.
pleasure.
Oh, appreciate it. So anyway, let's get back to you guys. So you've described yourselves as a classically trained garage band. For folks who aren't familiar with you, let's start by explaining your unique makeup. 2 violins, Kendall, Nikki Chooi, and double bass, Ranaan Meyer. Most classical string trios are typically made of violin, viola, and cello. Now, how did you guys come up with such a weird combination?
I know. It's interesting. A lot of when we didn't have any idea that this would be a band that 15, 16, 17 years after, we're sitting here 17 years later and we're actually having a career with this. It really started off as three guys with kind of like-minded affinity towards a certain activity. Being here back at Curtis, it just reminds us, after having these incredibly intensive, amazing rehearsals that take so much concentration, with Mueller, who we all loved so much, and who taught us so much. And
Mueller was the conducting
teacher here at Curtis, and we all came from different parts of this great country, and continues today that most young musicians are listening to a variety of different types of music and also going to and experiencing live performances of many genres, not just classical music, which is very focused. So the way we would let off steam, and this is how we found each other, was we would stay back in Curtis Hall, and we figured out how to dim the lights and make it like very moody, and we'd have these jam sessions, and it was just blowing off steam. Sometimes the theme of whatever we're working on with Mueller would make its way into a jam session. I put a hip hop beat behind it. Ranaan would funkify it. We were just playing, and it just happened to be 3 guys who played those particular instruments. So we weren't going in it saying, okay, we have the music of Brahms and, or the Mozart piano trio, so piano, violin, and cello, which are amazing. But we weren't thinking like that. We were just literally using, the cliche term, the language of music, to play with each other and to create. And it caused, again, like when we think back on those days, there was no end in sight. It was just something we would do for fun, and then we'd say goodnight and continue down the path of our studies, which we took very seriously and loved and cherished very much.
So really kind of a happy accident, not even something you had really put a lot of serious thought into. It was just a passion that seemed to bubble up all on its own, yeah?
It is, yeah. Keith Lockhart even came up to us after the first time we played with him at the Utah Symphony, and he said, "Man, you guys came up with a great concept."
I remember that, right?
And I said, Keith, it's a huge compliment, but we didn't come up with it. We stumbled upon it, fortunately. And he said, a bad word, and walked away. And, it's the nature of when you find yourself in this incredible school, the Curtis Institute of Music. I went to a great school before Curtis, and Manhattan School of Music, and it was special in a different way. But then when I came to Curtis, I found myself around all these crazy brains and miracles of life, and I it was like every day was a new experience, meeting somebody and getting inspired. Maybe it was completely through composed and just interpretive. But with the environment, especially meeting Nick, I remember the first time that I met Nick and we just jammed. And I can't remember what came first, the jazz club or whatever, but we just got together and there was like this abundance of energy and creativity. But it was like we had been creating music from birth. And then, just a few days ago, we improvised with Nikki, sort of, not for the first time, but for the first time with some time spread out. Mm-hmm. And the same thing happens, the same kind of like cosmic explosion of the universe happens. And people, I think, who make music, who've had these experiences, they know what I'm talking about. When you might be making music with a bunch of different ensembles, and then you finally get this opportunity, somehow the world lines up, the stars line up, and you have this explosion of energy. It doesn't mean it's necessarily super high octane or super low octane, but there's an explosion nonetheless. And all of a sudden, you're like, wow, I don't have to really think. I don't really have to, compute. I can just be. And you live in that mechanism and it happens. And once that happened for the first time with Time for Three, we didn't want to look back because we had played in so many different types of ensembles and varieties, different people, where we knew there was something very special here. But we didn't think, okay, let's go get our agent, let's get our manager, let's take pictures. It was more like, let's do this again because this is awesome. And then we, got our first gig, and we did that thinking that would maybe be our last gig, you know. And people had the same chemical or cosmic reaction that we did. That's what made it special.
Thanks so much for that, Ranaan and Nick. But I have to inject, because Curtis is not a place, at least from my experience, 19 years on the faculty, it's not a place that I've noticed that the students just get together to jam. I mean, it's very rare. There's a very strict traditional route that the students are channeled through in their private lessons, which are very intensive. The chamber music, this is a body of literature that's, so to speak, stuck. There's a foundation. I've never really heard of students that just get together just for the fun of it in their music. I mean, they get together for fun, but they do something non-musical. So what let's not go there. Okay, let's not go there. But
we did that too.
I'm not sure what we're
But you know what? I think what the remarkable thing is not, yes, this place, Curtis, is quite remarkable, but it's really the miracle of you guys finding each other and the incredible creativity that you had bundled. Had you missed each other by a few years, do you think you would have had this birth of creativity? Nick, what do you think?
Hard to say. I don't think it would have been, if we had been in different years, I probably would have, found something to, I kind of had two lives going on at Curtis. I had, when I first came, I had my desire to create or be part of these musical moments that were about the moment, like the visceral connection between people, like playing on the streets and feeling that energy of, playing. I used to play buckets on the street corners of Philly. And actually Gary Graffman and my teacher, Victor Danchenko, put in each a $20 bill while I was playing buckets on the corner of Locust and 18th. And I was playing in folk bands. I'd go to hip-hop poetry reading nights, and this is when the Roots were here in Philly. They weren't a famous band at all. Yeah. And so I was in that whole scene, and then on the other side, I was playing, the repertoire, the classical canon. So I was searching really for that connection between those two worlds. And I found it with Ranaan because so while we were at Curtis and it was at an orchestra rehearsal, before the orchestra rehearsal, I remember being told that there's a guy in the bass section that plays at Ortlieb's, which is one of the iconic jazz places throughout history of jazz.
Now just to interject, Curtis does not teach jazz formally.
No,
right? Okay.
And especially back then. And so I was just like, there's a guy who improvises who plays at a club at Curtis. This is like wicked cool. And I picked out Ranaan in the bass section because I was sitting the first, way in the back. And like Hillary Hahn was like in front of me or something. and I see Ranaan and I beeline right to him. I found out when he was playing and meeting Ranaan and then afterwards Zach was the first few moments of my life where the two worlds started to have a convergence with each other. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until like my third or fourth year at Curtis where I sort of had the moments in my life where why do the two worlds need to be compartmentalized? Why do they need to be separate? They don't. Mm. And actually a friend of ours, and Nikki, I don't know if you know him, but he's now the principal cellist of the St. Louis Symphony, Daniel Lee. Amazing cellist. He was in our class. Each other, okay. Yeah. And he saw me one summer play at the local clubs here. And I was playing and, having these jam sessions. And then I needed to, I was auditioning for Meyer to play concerto. So I wanted to run through Tchaikovsky concerto. And we were up in one of the rooms at Curtis, and this was the day after. And I played, and after I got done with the first one, I thought I did a really good job. And he looked at me with the strangest look. And he said, "What, last night your violin was like part of you, and you just were improvising all this. And now when you're playing Tchaikovsky, you're so rigid. Huh. And it's like coming from a different place. Why does it have to come from a different place?"
Interesting.
So it was like big firework going off for me. And that was a time when we were doing more jam sessions, and I was learning how to connect my improvisation with and letting the technique serve my ears rather than as soon as I'm playing classical music, I stop listening almost. Not anymore, of course it's now all connected, but sorry I'm rambling a little bit.
No, this is great. Nikki, now you're the newest member of Time for Three. It's interesting because we were talking with Nick and Ranaan, in a sense, 15, 17 years ago. There's a different environment. Mm-hmm. Has that changed now since you're younger and you're with the newest member? Are things different here at Curtis now? Is there a more of a spirit that fosters improvisation, creativity along the lines of what Nick and Ranaan were talking about?
I mean, well, first of all, I can't really compare, my experience at Curtis when they were at Curtis. But when I was here, it was pretty much, the chamber music, my regular lessons. I know for one thing, there was an improv class offered, and that's about as far as I know. But everything is still quite standard, quite foundation-based. The great classical sonatas and concerto reps and the great chamber music reps that I discovered and learned throughout my years here at Curtis. So.
Did you have that same, how should we say, a creative yearning that we're hearing being discussed here in terms of?
For me, I think it's more, I'm just eager for challenge. And let's take it back to when I first played with Ranaan and Nick when I was subbing. And, I heard about this group. I watched them live maybe once or twice, but I've known about them just throughout my years being here at Curtis, being in Philly, and just knowing people who know them. And, I hear they play jazz, they improv, they play bluegrass, they play this and that arrangement. So it's all quite overwhelming. It's like how do I, all I've done is, the standard, classical repertoire. And so I got the music, I prepared the best I can, and just I was just curious to see what happens, But then I realized, all the training that I got at Curtis, especially in chamber music and orchestra, where, you respond, you listen, you react to the people around you in an ensemble. I didn't have to, at least for now, what I do now in, playing all these types of music, I just respond to Ranaan if he, turns a corner, or I respond to Nick when he, does this or that. It's more about a give and take kind of thing. So that's so far my experience in the group. So.
I have to say, there's been so many people out there in the field who are not experts in the music world, but who have this perception oh my God, you guys are so free and you're improvising every moment. But there is a freedom, but it's actually, the needle isn't so far from the aspect of interpretation of any of the great masterworks, any of the, because while the creative process to construct an original work may come out of a jam session, where literally our canvas is silence and whatever sounds happen turns into a song or a piece. Once that piece is built, or once we have a concerto that's written for us, it's the same, it's just taking the interpretation, because it's usually crafted for us, to an extreme.
Interesting.
And that's why when we were thinking really hard about who would be Zach's successor, Ranaan and I, we started way out. We started like, okay, are we going to have like a rock and roll violinist? Or are we going to have a different instrument? I mean, we went way out. But it didn't feel natural, because really what this is about is, like Nikki, you're saying, it's about taking the solid foundation of what you learn playing the great repertoire and the sound, and playing in an ensemble that is just, there's just this thing that happens. And then from that centerpiece, it's just about experimenting, but making sure that the experimentation is extreme and the energy is extreme, but it's always toggled and harnessed from the thing that the three of us know. So we went through this very interesting process, and that's why Ranaan references the first time we jammed with Nikki the other day, because there was no music. It was just a jam session, but my God, there was so much being said. And for a guy who Nikki, you just said, coming to Time for Three, oh my God, they improvised, blah, blah, blah. No, it's actually coming from, improvisation is sometimes a word that's not quite understood or used in a way that it's misrepresented sometimes. I mean, the great classical artists improvise all the time. When we speak, we improvise.
That's very true. That's a great analogy.
Right,
great analogy. Yeah. We kind of dove in the deep end at the start of this interview, but almost forgot. I really want to give everybody a chance, especially folks who have never heard you guys before. Let's hear some music. I really want to hear some of your tracks. So for somebody who's never heard of Time for Three before, can you guys think of, maybe I'll just go around. Ranaan, what would you recommend as a good song that you guys have recorded? I know right now you only have tracks recorded with Zach, although there is a great video we'll reference a little bit later. But of the recordings you have now, what would you recommend as a great place for somebody to get started to understand what is Time for Three all about?
Well, and you know this because you're a musician, but it's like asking a chef, if you had to taste your food, what's the one dish, it's like, well, I need you to just let me take you on a little bit of a journey. We got to give you 5 courses. But I think, if you're into maybe, original stuff, listen, one of the songs that we've been playing a lot lately is a Time for Three throwback. It's an original that I wrote called Ecuador, which is inspired from kind of like Latino flavor, and it sort of takes a picture of the Lord of the Rings, if you will. Ooh. Because when I went to Ecuador for the first time, I saw the Lord of the Rings everywhere as far as the terrain. It just it jumped out at me. I have no idea where they shot the film, but man, it looked like that. And so that might be a good one to chew on.
All right, Nick, something that you recommend. What would you recommend somebody listen to if they're getting to the Time for Three world?
I think, something that I really love to play one of our songs that we cover is this indie artist, Imogen Heap. And it was in 2006. I saw the movie Last Kiss, and then Hide and Seek came on as the soundtrack. And because of that movie and that moment in the movie and her song, she kind of blew up. And the reason why I was so attracted to it is because her original is she layers her voice using electronic enhancement and production, but in a very subtle way. And to my ears, the way she treated the layering of her voice and the production aspect was, I likened it to how I would vibrato, like play a note, but use vibrato to color change it, or flautando, or just using just the natural sounds of an instrument. And so I flowed the idea to the guys, and our friend and longtime collaborator, Steve Hackman, constructed a real thick string harmony piece that I think does a really nice homage to her original song. So I would suggest that as a nice token to her great song, but also something that we love to play, Hide and Seek by Imogen Heap.
So now you guys are a band, and a really original one at that. We've talked a little bit about some of your origin and how you the universe conspired to bring you guys together. So what's really interesting as I'm hearing your story is the fact that this is so unplanned. It's almost an accident. So you guys are playing, you're jamming, you're trying some things out. How did you guys get started promoting and getting recognized? Especially since you guys didn't really plan this out.
Nick needed to eat.
Yeah, I was hungry and I needed something to pay for my bills.
But you did, right? I mean, like Nick was the first one out of Curtis.
Yeah, well,
out of three of us, and it was go time.
It was. Well, I was. I was very lucky. I won YCA.
This is the young concert artists. It's
it's a management that kickstarts the career of promising young soloists and performers
in classical music.
Mm-hmm. And I also had the chance simultaneously to have my first summer at Marlboro Music Festival. So these two things were quite impressive for me, impacted me, because I was around a lot of incredibly famous and amazing artists at Marlboro who all had careers, but then I was learning about how to promote yourself through classical music. And I also had kind of like this obsession with it in the last few years at Curtis, because I just love bands so much. So everybody had their VHS promotion video. Yeah, snap.
Their glossy
pictures.
Cool.
Like
That's
you
right.
put
The old
it
press
in
kits,
in the mail, snail mail.
Right, I remember those.
Yeah, and you had to make sure that you had a folder.
Oh, and over your bio page.
The bio page,
Oh my
8.5 by 11 piece of paper. It's paper.
Right.
No more
It's a
than 2 or
physical
3
thing.
pages.
Yeah. So we had to put all that together, and so I was sort of taking what I learned in the natural progression of my own solo career, and sort of offering that as tools to maybe help Time for Three at the very
You
beginning.
were pressing. You were an off-ramp. You were pressing, and it was awesome because we needed it in order to have something started. I mean, Nick started the fire. I mean, that's the honest truth. Because Zach was geared towards being an orchestra guy, playing in a violin section. I was geared towards being an orchestra, even though we had these other styles. And Nick was like, "We got something here, guys. Let's make something. Let's put this stuff together. Let's see if we can get some gigs." And we were resistant to it, me especially, because I had an audition coming up about 3 months later, and I wasn't ready for it. And we got into it because there were times where it was just like we had the juxtaposition of where we were in different parts of our careers, and that's kind of the specialty is when you feel something like Nick did, and he had to press because he knew it was the right thing to do, and eventually he got us, and he convinced us enough to go along with it, and sure enough, it did get people's attention. That we made a CD, which was a demo CD, but it also ended up being the first CD that we sold.
How cool!
And like literally, people would hear it, and it was such a new sound that immediately they would call us and give us a gig. It was that type of thing, and we had other projects where we did not get that response. I remember the first time we had a gig where we had the CDs to sell. And 40 people ran up to buy CDs immediately following the gig. And I was used to like 2 people. Like if I sold 2 CDs in another ensemble, that was a huge feather, in my cap. So
And you have to think about kind of the timing of everything. Like when Time for Three was starting this was 2000, 2001, 2002, and 3. Like the famous album that came out on Sony with Mark O'Connor, Edgar Meyer, and Yo-Yo Ma, Appalachian Waltz.
Yeah.
In the classical music industry, that album single-handedly blew up because it was so radical compared to, and celebrating America, our country. The awful thing that happened to our country with 9/11.
Yeah.
Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? The movie, came out with an incredible soundtrack that also became famous. And those two examples in the industry really caught fire. So then when Time for Three, coming from Curtis, which in itself in the United States is highlighted just as the excellent school that it is. So when this radical group was coming out of Curtis, I think a lot of people heard about it because it was such a juxtaposition of what they knew of what Curtis to be. But then it was a point of departure that allowed us to have a lot of curious ears. And then kind of set the stage no pun intended, but in literal sense. For them, what happened is you've referenced, the big moment for us, and I wasn't there, for Zach and Ranaan with the Philadelphia Orchestra.
Yeah. We were just mentioning there was this interesting moment I was going to reference where Ranaan and Zach, one of the original members, you guys were actually subbing in the Philadelphia Orchestra.
Yeah.
The lights went out and something happened. Ranaan, you want to kind of take it from there? What actually happened?
Yeah, it was a rainy, thundery summer day. It was July 31st, 2004, and yeah, like you said, I mean, Zach's playing in the fiddle section, I'm in the bass section, and it was supposed to be a start time of 8:05 at the Mann Center, which was a normal thing, and it was Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, so full choir, full orchestra, 5,000 people, because that's a big deal for, this area. Major symphony plays Beethoven Ninth. That's a huge blockbuster hit for the audience, and they're waiting in anticipation, and it gets to be 8:20 p.m. and basically the orchestra's asked to leave the stage until they figure out this problem, because the lights won't go on. And people need to read their music. Yeah. So I'm asked to actually go around the other side of the stage and interact with Zach. They said they wanted me on the other side of the stage. So, I'm a bass sub with the Philly Orchestra, and they want me on the other side of the stage. So I walk around, and I'm no dummy, so I'm putting together sort of what's going on, I'm pretty sure they want Zach and I to go do something.
So they actually, that was intentional on them.
Yeah, we walked over. They had, a lot of people had heard of our group at this point. Now, whether upper management actually knew it, what they were doing was they were going around asking Philadelphia Orchestra musicians to volunteer to go out and entertain. But the issue is they needed to read their music as well, because, no offense, but these are classical musicians who want to prepare and do their best. And so, you're asking them to go play for 5,000 people without any notice.
Yeah.
That's a big ask, so people were saying, no. I don't think that's the right thing. Even if I can read my music, that feels like not something I want to do without this, proper notice. So it was left up to kind of like the people who did things other than classical music. They could go out and riff, and the only people there at that moment were Zach and I. And so people said, oh, maybe ask Zach and Ranaan. They do like this bluegrassy fiddle thing or something like that.
Yeah.
And so they did, and because Nick wasn't there, Zach was a little ghost-eyed, if you will. He had been moving all day.
Oh, no.
And, asking him to go out and do this, he could do it without the music, yes, but there wasn't another violinist. So he had to learn, try to figure out really quick, when he doesn't play the melody, what to do. Wow. So he's kind of looking at me with ghost eyes, and he's sort of fingering the instrument, and he says, do you really want to do this, man? And I said, oh, we're doing this.
This is when stars are born. Yeah. To take note. Yeah.
So
you
it's cool.
seize the opportunity.
Yeah, there was this one emergency breaker microphone and one emergency breaker light center stage somehow.
Wow.
And the Mann Center president, who we're really good friends with to this day, Peter Lane, who's now in Arkansas at the Walden Arts Center. He went out and he said very respectfully to the audience, he set us up and he said, look, I have these two guys that are willing to come out and entertain you as we try to figure out this technical problem, but you have to really keep it quiet because all we have is this one mic and they're playing bass and violin, or it's going to be hard to hear otherwise. Everybody promised to do so, and you could hear a pin drop with these 5,000 people.
Wow. And this is in Philadelphia. The Mann Center is an amphitheater with a huge kind of a lawn where half the people sit underneath this shell, and then most of the other people are out in this big lawn hill area. It's an outdoor amphitheater.
In the rain.
In the rain.
And a lot of them actually had come in because they try to, fill it. And I'm sure they have their logistics and fire laws and all that stuff. But we were there and we played for 20 minutes and they listened and they gave us this huge ovation.
Wow.
We came back out, we played for another 20 minutes.
Oh, wow.
The audience had somewhat forgotten that they were there to hear Beethoven's Nine. And they came out and said, unfortunately, we can't get the lights back on, have a nice evening. People left as not in as such dismay as they were before the lights, were an issue. And literally 5 minutes after the last person left the audience, the lights went back on.
I was actually up at the breaker.
There you go.
Nick was at Marlboro. Yeah, whatever.
So this is amazing. Amazing happenstance, amazing circumstances. And then, of course, Nick, you're gunning the publicity and trying to make this whole thing work. At what point did you guys look at each other and say, I think we're on to something really, really big? You had mentioned you started selling lots of CDs, but was there a specific point where you felt like there was a tipping point that you knew that this is going to be for real?
Ranaan gives me such wonderful credit. I'm grateful for having the foresight to push the group to have publicity material and all this. But really, I think we were all observing how the reactions the audience would have to the kind of energy the three of us would output, but also individually, we were all doing different things. And the energy we felt between the three of us was just so amazing. So the two combined was something that we took note of. And it was actually probably one of our first big gigs that we got asked for. We got asked to go play a corporate gig down in Washington, D.C. Like the day, I think it was like the last day of the second semester of Curtis. And they wanted to treat us nicely, so they picked us up in a limo.
Whoa.
Just imagine 3 Curtis students getting, they put the limo to pick us up right outside the steps of Curtis. So we were just, showing off a little swagger. And we go down there and we played for 15 minutes to a crowd of almost 2,000 people. It was huge. It was a corporate event, like all executives and all this. And it was amazing. And we got off stage, and the guy who invited us, we were in our little green room, and the audience just went nuts. And we were like, gosh, we should, we didn't put that much effort into making this happen.
Yeah.
Compared to the other things that we do in our life. So what if we put some effort into this? What would happen? And we put some effort in, and now we enjoy the fruits of a lot of labor.
Wow. Now, we were mentioning, of course, Zach DePue, who was one of the original members. Last summer, he made the decision to leave Time for Three and devote himself full-time to being the concertmaster of the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra. What I wanted to ask you, was this a difficult departure? Had he let you guys know that he was thinking about this ahead of time, or was it sudden? If you don't mind sharing a little bit of that story,
sure, yeah,
that'd be great.
Technically, I think the world knew last summer, but we knew the end of February. That's when he told us on a ride to one of our gigs. It was interesting because, just kind of backing up for a second, we had needed for one of our gigs, 1 week of gigs, based on a scheduling snafu, which had always been, ironically, the issue for 15 years with Time for Three, because Zach wore 2 hats. He was married to 2 different women or organizations because he was concertmaster of the ISO, the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, and also played in Time for Three. And those are 2 very full-time jobs as far as the integrity that needs to go into it. And based on needing somebody for a week, for a gig in January 2015, but we knew that we needed somebody like maybe a year or a little less than a year before that. We went on a hunt for a substitute for 1 week, and we came across Nikki Chooi, who's sitting right here, who ended up being the sub for that 1 week, and it was an incredible experience. And we left that week, and then literally about a month later is when Zach told us, after we had this amazing experience with Nikki, that he was going to be leaving the group. So it wasn't just immediate that we said, okay, well, Nikki's our guy, we had a great experience, let's just go with him. It was more now, okay, let's start, after getting over sort of the impact of one of your band members saying we're leaving, which didn't happen overnight, after a few weeks or a month or whenever it was, the search began. And Nick and I really put a lot of hard thought into what that looked like. After a lot of thought, a lot of review, we came back to Nikki just because of this, again, amazing sort of chemical explosion that we felt while playing with Nikki. And that's when we started to then get our PR and our release out to the world on what that would look like, notifying presenters, et cetera, and that sort of thing. But it wasn't until, and we kept on telling, we have a great management team, we have a great booking agent, a great record label, business manager, everybody does an amazing job. But we kept on saying to them, this is something, we're working as efficiently as possible, but it's got to be right. We got to pick the right guy. We got to feel 100% sure about that. And we did. We know we did. We're really, that's an important decision to feel like, you did your due diligence as an artist. This whole thing is about integrity. It's about integrity for Zach, so he can, do one thing at a very high level. And it's integrity for the group, so we can devote our lives to this group, to making it what it is. When you have something special, like we've been talking about, that's one thing, and that's worth a lot. But then there's do you take it for granted, or do you think about how much you could really push that to the nth degree to make it at the highest level of integrity, artistry, marketing, everything that goes into what is a successful music group. And there's a lot. And that doesn't mean necessarily that you're out 52 weeks a year touring, but it means that you're giving everything that you have in an unexhausting way to create your art at a high level. So that's what this decision was all about.
Nikki, you really are at the start of your career. You're with Astral Artists. In fact, we just played together a last-minute gig a few weeks ago, and you were incredible. You have Astral Artists helping you get your career off the ground. Now you have this group, Time for Three. Is this changing your trajectory in terms of what you're planning for your future?
Oh, yes, actually. I finished school in May of 2014. I just won a big competition, the Michael Hill competition in New Zealand, so it gave me a lot of opportunity and exposure. And Astral Artists as well has been helping me a lot with career building. And also I've just started working with my own solo management in the fall before I met Time for Three. So I had all these activities going on, just building for life after school. And I was, combining, solo recitals to concerto playing, to also playing chamber music, and also collaborating with my brother, Timothy, who's also a violinist. So we've been doing a lot of activities together and touring together a lot. And I guess when I subbed for Time for Three back in January of 2015, I thought that was like a one-off thing, it was, I just wanted to try, they called me up, the summer before, half a year before. They told me this and that is what we're gonna play, prepare it, and I did, and spent the week with them, had a blast, and thought that was the end of a chapter, and back to building my own little pool of opportunities and events. Then a couple months after that, that's when the call came in about asking to join Time for Three, as a member, and that was something I did not expect at all.
Was that a hard decision?
So, in the get-go, it was quite obvious, when I heard, when they asked me, we want you to join us, it was like, whoops, I swore.
It's okay.
Who's your? You can bleep that.
I'll put a tasteful bleep in there for you. He said a naughty word.
Put a C minor chord.
There you go.
So yeah, when Time for Three asked if I would like to join them, the first thought I had was, it's an opportunity I can't turn down. And I had to go around asking for advice and all that, and just thought about it, sit on it was it like almost a month or something? And here we are.
How cool. How cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I wanted to get into actually the business of it, so to speak. I'm wondering, so are you guys, now, just feel free to, if you're uncomfortable answering this, let me know, but are you guys making a livable wage as a band? I mean, it's an important question. Does Time for Three really take care of you guys financially?
We're very fortunate that even though we have, on a business side, up until Nikki's entry into the group, we have been a halftime group. It's another misperception of Time for Three, which I will say I think has been a credit to our work and our entrepreneurial spirit, and always having perspective on what it is that we do and the difference between the line that you have to carefully walk, that we have walked, between, finding things that sell without losing the thing that we love about playing in the first place. And so that was always like an interesting thing, but I think we did well, because even before Nikki's coming on board, we have been able to sustain a very nice living. And it's always surprising for all of us, but for me, I always get surprised when I realize I'm getting paid for this stuff, But we're very lucky, and on the business side, we do as well and better than our colleagues within the classical music market, and we do, in the indie market and in the commercial market, we're doing very well as but also not as well as other people. But we're at a very nice, we're entering into a very nice solid space that we can grow from. And that's the exciting thing. Again, just entering into this new chapter with Nikki, it's just incredible that it's been that people are often surprised. Our business partners are just like, oh my gosh, our perception was you're full-time. So knowing that you've gotten this far with halftime, think about what can happen with a full-time situation.
Yeah.
And like Ranaan said, it's not about filling every single free time with dates. There's so much about this group just because of lack of time, and it's always been a funny thing. Our name is Time for Three, but there has been very little time for three, actually. Now we actually do, and that's about discovery. We're being very, Nikki's time right now is very valuable, because he has, in the classical music world, you get booked several years out. And he's literally making time for Three during in a very already auspicious and busy international solo schedule that he has now. So we're like, it's this beautiful musical dance that we're doing, and we're figuring it out. And it's really the spirit of the three of us that we're trying to figure out how we're going to make this great in the future. I mean, there's just so much to dig into, but it's very exciting.
Ranaan, I want to start with you with this next question. What advice do you have for musicians, classical musicians in particular, to pursue originality and creativity, really that breaks all the rules? I mean, for young musicians today, if you're an inspiration to a lot of them. I mean, as an example, you have this fantastic video that Nikki, you're part of, playing this great cover of Taylor Swift's Shake It Off, arranged by Steve Hackman, who we just referenced a little while ago. And these kids, you see the little kids who were from the top, protégés, jamming together with you guys, and that's inspiring. You must be inspiring so many young people. What advice do you guys have to help these young kids who are in a very strict training regimen to still discover creativity and originality and to do something along the lines, not exactly like what you guys do, but to discover themselves the way that you guys fortunately have. And I want to ask all of you, but
keep practicing.
Ranaan, I want to lead off with you with that one.
I have the luxury to answer that question very romantically, which not everybody does. Yeah. And so I'm very, very grateful to be able to answer in that way. And for me, that word creativity is the be all and the end all. Everything else is a far cry second to it. And then you have to ask yourself as a musician, well, what in the heck is he talking about? What is creativity? What does that mean in terms of what I do? Because I live with my music and I try to just make the instrument sound good, or I just try to sing well, or, what do you mean, be creative? Well, if you don't know what that means, you have a major journey ahead. Yeah. And that journey should be constant. Looking up to other artists and figuring out what it is they do to be creative. Singing, acting, seeing colors, everything that is anything that we know of, which is that imagination, the imaginative aspect of music making, and then finding your way to be creative personally through that, putting your fingerprint on that. Well, some people would hear me say this right now, and they would critique it because they would say, well, most people aren't going to be able to do that, Ranaan. That's going to be so hard. There's going to be a lot of people that, need to do this or that in order to survive in the music world. And
sure. My
retort is ideal, which is, if that's the case, then maybe music isn't the answer for that person. If that's the case, maybe half of that is something that they'll be able to find. And that's so much more beautiful than not being able to find it at all and making a living doing something that doesn't have creativity in it. So I think it's so crucial, no matter at what level that you are, beginner, intermediate, advanced, professional, to be striving for that in your music making. And that will mean that you'll land where you're supposed to land. As a younger person, I remember when I would hear esoteric answers like this one, and I would think, you got to be kidding me. I mean, like, what did you didn't just give me anything, Well, it's not my job to give you specifics. It's my job to inspire that, and then you go to your teacher to unpack those specifics, and you talk about it with your colleagues, and hopefully, 20 years from now, you might have a little bit of an understanding of what it is we're talking about. Because I remember when I was 15 and I was starting to get excited about my instrument, and I would go to my teacher and I'd say, what do I do to make this happen? I want to be a professional musician. And immediately the teacher would say, slow down, take a breath. This is a long journey. Your heart, I can already tell, is in it. So enjoy this amazing ride, because it's going to be incredible if you truly feel what I think you feel. So let's just go on that long ride together.
Awesome. Nikki, if you don't mind sharing what advice you would give, especially given your unique situation, having just come out of Curtis and jumping into this wild creative gang here.
Yes, indeed. Wild creative gang. I would say just, do what you love doing, and don't be afraid to take risks or challenges. I think the only thing that can hold you back is not being able to dive into, the possibilities are limitless. It's only limited by your imagination. So just keep imagining and keep striving for what you love doing, and don't be afraid to, fall into the deep end and, pick yourself back up and try again. So it's a lifelong journey, as Ranaan was saying, and whether you make it now or make it in 10 years, it's as long as you get there, that's all that matters. Yeah.
Nick, we close off with you.
There's always an urge to there's always an urge to find the answer immediately, And if you don't get the answer immediately, it's like, I'm failing, and I want to quit and all this. But really, the most important, looking back, if I were to have the opportunity to go back and talk to me, I would definitely say do things differently. Don't lose some things, but I wish I actually went to class. For example, I actually wish that, the one thing that I think that is a tool for me that has brought me a lot of joy is my love to connect through my music and through playing the instrument and as a person also. But the one thing that I always challenged me was taking advantage completely. And I did take advantage. I was very immersed here at Curtis, but I wish I even did more. Like, I really wish I was a steward of the great masters and the great, and for me, hearing music and absorbing it and then interpreting it and then being able to collaborate with was always very easy. What was hard for me was reading, like taking the written page and absorbing it and making that my own, or, having to sit literally still and let information absorb. And so when I actually think in today's world, there's even more value in the core classical rep than ever before, because it's genius stuff. But there's also such an importance for this freedom of energy, this visceral affinity to want to connect, and the balance of those two. But one doesn't exist without the other. And it's I just say for young people, focus when you're young and you don't have to pay bills. Then it's the time to stay up all night. And if you don't know the answer, then have faith. Have faith that you will, so long as you're really studying hard and you're really practicing and you're really asking a lot of questions, the answer will come, because if you're able to attain that information, that means you're brilliant. And that means that if you're able to take all that in, then you will be able to turn the corner and output it in a very original and inspirational and artistic way. I know it.
Guys, thank you so much for being on the show. What a blast to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
This episode of A Musical Life has been brought to you by A Musical Life Mastermind. What if your career didn't depend on passing an audition, winning a competition, or being discovered by some high-profile manager? What if you could make a living with your music on your own terms? As an entrepreneur and pianist who's performed in Carnegie Hall and collaborated with some of the world's greatest musicians, I have a passion for helping artists navigate the bridge from passion to profit. If you're ready to turn your what if into what now, to learn something new and think outside the box, then I invite you to discover how your artistry gives you the tools you need to succeed. Visit amusicallifemastermind.com to get personalized tips and a free ebook to help you grow your music and create your own musical future. Once again, that web address is amusicallifemastermind.com. For links to Time for Three's website, as well as a list of the songs featured in this episode and a great video of them performing that Taylor Swift song together with some protégés of From the Top, visit the show notes at amusicallife.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for our weekly newsletter to get the latest updates on my special series on musical entrepreneurs. And if you enjoy this show, I hope you'll take a moment to post a quick review on iTunes by going to amusicallife.com/review. Don't forget, you can also send me your feedback or your own musical stories by voicemail by going to amusicallife.com and looking for the Send Voicemail tab along the right side of the screen with your smartphone or computer. I'd love to hear from you, and if you're a musician or band, I'd love to help promote your music. Until next time, I'm Hugh Sung, and I wish you a musical life.